Okay guys, this is part 2 of the email video. So yesterday we talked about what is an email, what are its components. So you have the recipient, who you're sending it to, you have the subject line where you type what the email is about, and then you start your email just as you would a letter. Okay, now we're going to move on and we're going to talk about some new things that you need to know about emails. For instance, you need to know the audience. Think about the person reading your email. How would you address them if you were speaking to them? Maintain a formal tone, unless you're writing a quick email to a friend or a family member. Okay, so you have different types of audience. You're going to determine if each type of audience is formal or informal. It says talk with a partner or group, but we're just going to talk through this right here. So if you were emailing a teacher, that would be considered a formal email. Just like if I were emailing one of my professors, I wouldn't email them like I would email a friend. I would be more formal. I would make sure my grammar, my spelling is correct, and I would make sure all my ducks were in a row. Best friend, informal. Boss, formal. Sibling, informal. Parent, informal. Principal, formal. Professor, what I mentioned earlier, definitely formal. If I were emailing a business, definitely formal. Okay, so just like what they said over here, we've got our formal and we've got our informal. What's the biggest difference between the two? So if I had to stop and think about that, what is the biggest difference? Well, how I talk to these people and how I would write to them is very different than how I would write to my best friend or write to my siblings or write to my parents. Let's look at that in an example right here. It says, when you are writing an email to a teacher, professor, or professional, use formal language and avoid emojis or slang. Yeah, so if I were writing to my boss, if I were writing to Miss Everly, or if I were writing to Dr. Grover, I wouldn't be using emojis or anything of that sort. My email might look something like this email does. So they've got the recipient, the subject line, which says questions about homework. Then it says, hello, Mrs. Luong. I had a question regarding the homework assignment that is due at the end of the week. I read the directions but wanted to clarify if I needed to do 2 or 3 prompts from the writing menu. Please let me know at your earliest convenience. I appreciate your time. Sincerely, Andrew. Okay, that's very formal. Now here's an example of an informal email that you might send. It says, it's to Crystal. The subject line is OMG. So right away tells me you're emailing a friend or something of that sort. The email does not have a introduction. It just jumps right into the body and it says, did you watch American Idol last night? I can't believe what happened. Call me so we can talk about what happened. Andrew, with a smiley face. Okay, 2 very different types of email. Are both okay? Sure, absolutely. You just have to know who your audience is before you're sending it. Okay, impact. Words are powerful. They can have a lasting impression on others. Think about the thoughts and feelings of the recipient before writing an email. Ask yourself, how might they react to this message? Okay, let's look at that further. Here's an example of a negative email. So this one goes to Crystal. The subject line is grade on the math test, and it says, hello, Mrs. Long. I don't understand why I didn't get more points on my math test. You only gave me 1/2 of the last question, and I think I should have gotten more. I usually get a very good grade on my math test. I hope you change it. Sincerely, Andrew. Okay, you can kind of feel it. Those words are very intrusive and very harsh. Okay, so when I read that message, it kind of has this negative tone to it. Okay, versus the other one right here that has a positive tone. So it's also the subject line, grade on the math test. Hello, Mrs. Long. I hope you are having a good day. Thank you for taking the time to grade my math test. I had a question regarding the last question on the test. I received half credit and wanted to see if I could ask you what I could have done to receive full credit. I appreciate you taking the time to read and respond to this email. Sincerely, Andrew. See, that's much more positive, and I have a much better attitude when I would have a much better attitude going to respond to this positive email versus the negative one. Okay, the last thing you should do when you're doing emails is you should look over it. Even a well-written email can lose credibility, meaning it can lose meaning if it's filled with typos and errors. As with all writing, the last step in writing an email is to proofread it before sending. Okay, so you need to be looking for capitalization, spelling, and punctuation. So what they did is they had this, like their rough draft up here, okay? And they went through and they noticed there's no capital letters, there was no introduction, and the spelling was atrocious. So they went back through and they edited that. Because if I were to receive an email that looked like this, one, I wouldn't take you very seriously, okay? But this one, this tells me you took your time and you thought about what you were sending and you were careful about it, okay? So let's review. Email etiquette. So it should be meaningful. You should know who your audience is. You should think about the impact. Is it going to be a positive email or a negative email? And you should look over your email prior to sending it. All right, congrats. Now you should be able to email like a pro.